Chapter 16, Episode 16, Vernal Vortex. As the first rays of dawn broke over Hallowville, a massive magical storm erupted, centered on the hidden garden. The sky darkened ominously, swirling with vibrant hues of spring green and Halloween orange. Vortexes of conflicting magical energies clashed overhead, creating a spectacle both beautiful and terrifying. Sabrina, her face set with determination, gathered her team at the edge of town. "We need to reach the garden," she shouted over the howling winds that alternated between warm spring breezes and chilly October gusts. "It's the key to stabilizing this chaos." As they pressed forward, the team encountered pockets where reality itself seemed to warp. One moment, they were trudging through ankle-deep snow, and the next, they found themselves surrounded by blooming cherry blossoms. The rapid shifts were disorienting, but Sabrina kept them focused on their goal. Noah's voice crackled over their magical communicators. "I've got the emergency services mobilized," he reported. "We're evacuating civilians from the most affected areas and setting up magical shelters. Be careful out there. The storm's effects are unpredictable." Quill, hovering near Sabrina's shoulder, chirped urgently. Its quills glowed with an intense light, and suddenly a shimmering portal appeared before them. "Good thinking, Quill," Sabrina praised. "These safe passages will help us navigate the worst of it." The team gratefully entered the portal, emerging on the other side of a particularly volatile area. Here, they found themselves face to face with a group of magical creatures drawn to the storm's chaotic energy. A cluster of playful wind sprites danced around them while a grumpy-looking troll lumbered nearby, clearly agitated by the magical disturbances. "Easy now," Sabrina called out, raising her hands in a gesture of peace. "We're here to help restore balance." Her words seemed to calm the friendly creatures, but the troll roared in defiance, charging towards them. With a swift motion, Sabrina cast a spell, creating a protective bubble around her team. The troll's fist bounced harmlessly off the magical barrier. "We don't have time for this," she muttered. "Quill, can you create a diversion?" The hedgehog familiar nodded, its quills bristling with energy. It created a series of small portals around the troll, each one emitting different seasonal scents: spring flowers, summer fruits, autumn leaves, and winter pine. Confused and overwhelmed, the troll stumbled away, leaving their path clear. As they pressed on, the effects of the magical storm became more pronounced. Trees they passed would suddenly sprout leaves, bloom, and shed their foliage in a matter of seconds. Grass grew and withered beneath their feet. In one startling moment, they watched as an entire field of pumpkins grew, ripened, and rotted in the span of a minute. "The imbalance is accelerating natural processes," one of Sabrina's students observed, her voice filled with awe and concern. Sabrina nodded grimly. "All the more reason we need to reach the garden quickly. The longer this goes on, the harder it will be to restore balance." As they neared their destination, the magical resistance intensified. The winds grew stronger, howling with voices that seemed to whisper warnings and threats. Bolts of seasonal magic, spring's pastel hues and Halloween's eerie greens and purples, arced across the sky, striking the ground around them. Sabrina's protective bubble flickered under the assault. Sweat beaded on her brow as she poured more energy into maintaining their shield. "Everyone, lend me your strength," she called out. "Focus on balance, the meeting point between spring's renewal and Halloween's mystery." The team joined hands, channeling their combined magical energy through Sabrina. The protective bubble stabilized, taking on a pearlescent sheen that reflected both the vibrant colors of spring and the deep, rich hues of Halloween. Quill, sensing the team's strain, redoubled its efforts. It created a series of connected portals, forming a protected pathway leading towards the hidden garden. "Brilliant, Quill!" Sabrina exclaimed. "Everyone, quickly now!" They rushed through the portal pathway, emerging just outside the garden's entrance. Here, the storm's fury was at its peak. The very air seemed to shimmer with conflicting magics, and reality itself appeared to bend and warp around them. The entrance to the hidden garden, once concealed behind a subtle magical veil, now pulsed with chaotic energy. Sabrina could see glimpses of the garden beyond, areas of riotous spring growth clashing with patches of Halloween decay. "This is it," Sabrina said, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. "Once we're inside, we'll need to work quickly to initiate the balancing ritual. Is everyone ready?" Her team nodded, their faces a mix of determination and apprehension. They had prepared for this moment, but the sheer magnitude of the magical storm had exceeded even their most extreme predictions. Sabrina took a deep breath, centering herself. She could feel the conflicting energies pulling at her, trying to sway her towards either spring's vibrant renewal or Halloween's mysterious shadows. But she stood firm, embodying the balance they sought to restore. "Remember," she said, meeting each team member's eyes, "we're not fighting against either spring or Halloween magic. We're here to bring them into harmony. Hallowville's essence is in the balance between these forces. That's what we're here to protect." As Sabrina and her team entered the hidden garden, they were immediately struck by the sight before them. The opposing faction, a group of robed figures, stood in a circle around an intricate magical array. At the center, a swirling vortex of pure spring magic pulsed with alarming intensity, clearly the source of the chaotic storm raging outside. "They're trying to force an eternal spring," Sabrina whispered, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. "If they succeed, it'll destroy Hallowville's entire magical ecosystem." Noah nodded grimly. "We need to stop them, fast." Sabrina's keen magical senses quickly analyzed the ritual circle. Her eyes darted from one glowing rune to another, identifying key points where the magical flow could be disrupted. "There," she pointed discreetly, "and there. If we can interrupt those nodes, we might be able to destabilize the whole thing." Noah immediately began organizing the team. "All right, we need a diversion," he said, his voice low but commanding. "Mira, Jasper, you're with me. We'll draw their attention to the east side of the garden. Sabrina, that should give you a clear path to the ritual site." As Noah's group moved into position, Sabrina felt a familiar warmth against her leg. She looked down to see Quill, its quills glowing with anticipation. "Ready, little friend?" she asked. Quill chirped in response, a determined look in its eyes. Suddenly, a burst of magical energy exploded near Noah's group, signaling the start of their diversion. Shouts of alarm rose from the opposing faction as they turned to face the unexpected threat. Sabrina seized the opportunity, darting towards the ritual circle with Quill at her heels. But they hadn't gone far before a defender spotted them, unleashing a torrent of spring magic in their direction. Vines erupted from the ground, reaching for Sabrina with thorny tendrils. She countered with a quick Halloween spell, causing the vines to wither and crumble to dust. All around them, the air crackled with conflicting energies as spring and Halloween magics clashed. Noah and his team were holding their own, their carefully practiced spells keeping the bulk of the defenders occupied. But it was clear they were outnumbered, and the strain was beginning to show. As Sabrina neared the ritual circle, she felt the full force of its magic bearing down on her. It was like pushing against a gale-force wind, each step forward a monumental effort. Just when it seemed she might be blown back, she felt a surge of energy from behind her. Quill had positioned itself at her back, its small body glowing intensely as it absorbed the brunt of the magical onslaught. The hedgehog familiar chirped encouragingly, urging Sabrina forward. With renewed determination, Sabrina pressed on. She reached the edge of the circle, her hands moving in complex patterns as she began to weave a counterspell. Identifying one of the key nodes she had spotted earlier, she focused her magic, aiming to disrupt the flow of energy. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, with a sound like shattering glass, the node flickered and went dark. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The swirling vortex at the center of the circle wobbled, its steady rhythm disrupted. Outside, the magical storm fluctuated wildly. Bolts of seasonal magic shot in all directions, causing trees to bloom and wither in seconds. The very air seemed to ripple with unstable energy. But Sabrina's victory was short-lived. The leader of the opposing faction, a tall figure in elaborate robes, stepped forward. With a gesture of immense power, they unleashed a wave of pure spring magic. The force of it was overwhelming. Sabrina felt herself being pushed back, her Halloween magic seeming pale and weak in comparison. All around her, she could see her teammates struggling against the tide of vibrant, overpowering spring energy. In that critical moment, as defeat seemed imminent, Sabrina had a flash of insight. She remembered the words of the ancient tree spirit, speaking of balance and harmony between the seasons. With Quill's unwavering support at her side, she made a daring decision. Instead of fighting against the spring magic, Sabrina opened herself to it. At the same time, she channeled the deepest essence of Halloween magic: mystery, transformation, the turning of the year's wheel. In her mind and heart, she held these opposing forces, not in conflict, but in balance. With a cry that seemed to echo through the very fabric of reality, Sabrina released her spell. It wasn't spring or Halloween magic, but something entirely new, a perfect fusion of both. The effect was instantaneous. The overwhelming surge of spring magic faltered, meeting an equal and opposite force. For a breathless moment, the two energies seemed to war with each other. Then, slowly but surely, they began to intermingle, swirling together in a dance of perfect balance. The leader of the opposing factions stumbled back, their ritual disrupted by this unexpected turn of events. The vortex at the center of their circle sputtered and died, the chaotic storm outside calming to a gentle breeze. Sabrina swayed on her feet, drained by the immense effort. But there was no time to rest. "Quickly," she called to her team, "we need to set up our own ritual before they can recover." As the opposing faction reeled from their failure, Sabrina and her team sprang into action. They had practiced this, rehearsing each step until it was second nature. Noah coordinated their movements, ensuring each person was in the right position. Quill scampered around the circle, its enhanced abilities allowing it to lay down a perfect magical foundation for their ritual. Sabrina stood at the center, her hands moving in intricate patterns as she began to weave the complex spell that would restore balance to Hallowville's magic. The air around them began to shimmer, a soft glow emanating from the ritual circle. As Sabrina chanted the words of power, she could feel the magic of Hallowville responding, eager to return to its natural state of equilibrium. As the magical storm raged on, Noah reluctantly left Sabrina and the others at the hidden garden. He knew his skills were needed elsewhere. With a final nod to Sabrina, he turned and sprinted back towards the heart of Hallowville, determination etched on his face. The town was in chaos. Streams of conflicting magic coursed through the streets, causing reality to warp and shift unpredictably. Noah dodged a suddenly sprouting tree and narrowly avoided a time bubble where a group of citizens were moving in slow motion. Reaching the sheriff's office, Noah quickly established a command center. He commandeered the largest room, setting up a mix of magical artifacts and standard emergency response equipment. A large map of Hallowville dominated one wall, magically updating to show the latest hotspots of magical activity. "All right, people," Noah called out to the assembled team of deputies and magical volunteers. "We've got a town to save. I need teams out there handling the major disturbances. Priority is civilian safety and containing the magical fallout." He began assigning tasks, his voice steady despite the urgency of the situation. "Team A, head to Main Street. We've got reports of time distortions affecting traffic. Team B, take the park. The plants are growing out of control. Team C, the residential area near Elm Street has people randomly transforming. Get them contained and comfortable until we can reverse the effects." As the teams dispersed, Noah turned his attention to his enchanted police equipment. The specially modified gear hummed with energy, detecting surges of magical activity across town. He studied the readings, identifying the most critical areas that needed immediate attention. A group of Sabrina's magic students arrived, looking both nervous and excited. Noah couldn't help but smile at their enthusiasm. "Glad you're here," he said. "We need all the help we can get. I want you to focus on setting up protective wards around key locations: the hospital, the power plant, and the water treatment facility. These need to stay operational no matter what." The students nodded, their faces set with determination as they hurried off to their tasks. Noah felt a surge of pride. These young people were stepping up when their town needed them most. As the night wore on, reports kept flooding in. Noah coordinated responses, relaying information and redirecting resources as needed. His enchanted radio crackled with a mix of standard police chatter and magical updates. "Chief," one of his deputies called out, "we've got a situation at the town limits. The magical effects are starting to spill over into Millbrook and Riverton." Noah's heart sank. This was exactly what they'd been afraid of. If the magical chaos spread to other towns, it could quickly become a regional disaster. He knew that most of the neighboring communities had little to no experience with magic. They'd be completely unprepared for what was coming. "Get me a secure line to the Millbrook police chief," Noah ordered, "and see if you can reach the mayor of Riverton. We need to coordinate our response, and fast." As he waited for the connections to be made, Noah wrestled with a difficult decision. The magical nature of the crisis had been Hallowville's secret for generations. Revealing it now would change everything. But as he looked at the map, watching the tendrils of magic creep beyond the town's borders, he knew there was no choice. The first call came through. Chief Martinez from Millbrook. Noah took a deep breath. "Bill, it's Noah. We've got a situation here that's about to become your situation too. I need you to listen carefully and try to keep an open mind. What I'm about to tell you is going to sound crazy, but I swear it's the truth." Over the next hour, Noah had similar conversations with leaders from the surrounding towns. He explained the magical nature of the crisis as best he could, offering guidance on how to recognize and contain the effects. Some were skeptical, others panicked, but all understood the gravity of the situation. "I'm sending some of my people your way," Noah told them. "They have experience with this kind of thing. Follow their lead, and we'll get through this together." As he coordinated this expanded response, Noah couldn't help but worry about Sabrina and the others at the hidden garden. He knew they were facing the heart of the storm, battling against forces that could reshape reality itself. All he could do was hold the line here in town, giving them the time they needed to set things right. A loud crash from outside drew Noah's attention. He looked out the window to see a car floating several feet off the ground, its driver looking terrified and confused. With a sigh, he grabbed his enchanted gear and headed for the door. It was going to be a long night, but he was determined to see Hallowville, and now the entire region, through this crisis. As he stepped outside, Noah's enchanted badge began to glow, detecting a surge of magical energy. He set his jaw, ready to face whatever came next. The fate of Hallowville and beyond rested on their ability to contain this chaos until Sabrina could restore the balance. And Noah was determined not to let them down. As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky, Sabrina's heart raced with growing urgency. She glanced at the conflicting magical energies swirling around them, her mind working furiously to calculate the potential outcomes. With a sinking feeling, she realized that if they didn't resolve this magical standoff by sunrise, the consequences would be catastrophic. "Noah," she called out, her voice tense but determined, "we need to finish this before the sun comes up. If we don't, the magical backlash could destroy Hallowville entirely." Noah's face paled, but he nodded resolutely. "What do we need to do?" Sabrina quickly conferred with her team, their voices hushed but intense as they discussed the final components needed for their stabilizing ritual. After a moment of deliberation, she turned back to the group. "We need to split up," she announced. "There are 4 key elements we still need to gather, and we don't have much time." She divided them into groups, assigning each team a specific task. "Remember," she warned, "the magic is more unstable than ever. Be prepared for anything." As the teams dispersed, Sabrina and Noah established a magical communication link, allowing them to coordinate efforts across the increasingly chaotic town. They watched as each group set out, determination etched on their faces. The first team, led by one of Sabrina's most promising students, headed towards the old clock tower. They needed a gear from its mechanism, one that had ticked through countless Halloweens. As they approached, they found the tower shifting between seasons, its appearance changing every few seconds. Using their combined magic, they created a bubble of stable time around themselves, allowing them to enter and retrieve the gear. The second group made their way to the town's oldest graveyard, seeking a handful of soil from the first grave ever dug in Hallowville. They encountered the spirits of past residents, confused and agitated by the magical disturbance. With a mix of diplomacy and protective spells, they managed to calm the spirits and obtain the soil. The third team ventured into the heart of the Spring faction's territory, needing a bloom from the first flower of spring. They faced fierce opposition, engaging in a magical skirmish with faction members. Using clever illusions and quick thinking, they managed to snatch the bloom and escape. The final group, accompanied by Quill, had perhaps the most challenging task. They needed to collect dewdrops from a meadow that existed in a pocket dimension, accessible only during the moment between night and day. As they searched for the entrance, they found reality bending around them, locations shifting unpredictably. It was here that Quill's growing powers proved invaluable. The hedgehog familiar, its quills glowing with intense magical energy, began to create shimmering bridges across the distorted spaces. These ephemeral pathways allowed the team to navigate the chaos, finally locating the hidden meadow and gathering the precious dewdrops. Throughout it all, Sabrina and Noah remained in constant communication, their voices a lifeline in the magical storm. They relayed information, warned of new dangers, and coordinated the team's movements across Hallowville. "The clock tower team is back," Noah reported, his voice tense but steady in Sabrina's mind. "They've got the gear." "Good," Sabrina replied, her eyes scanning the horizon. The sky was growing lighter by the minute. The graveyard team just checked in. They're on their way back now. As the minutes ticked by, Sabrina felt the pressure mounting. The conflicting magics were growing more intense, the very fabric of reality straining under the pressure. She could sense the opposing factions' ritual reaching its peak, pushing harder against the natural balance of Hallowville. Finally, with mere minutes to spare, the last team stumbled back into the hidden garden, Quill leading the way. The hedgehog familiar looked exhausted but proud, its quills still sparking with residual magic from its dimensional bridges. "We've got everything," one of the team members gasped, holding out a vial of shimmering dewdrops. Sabrina nodded, relief washing over her. "Just in time," she said, glancing at the lightening sky. "Let's begin." As the team assembled around her, Sabrina began the stabilizing ritual. She channeled the combined power of Halloween and spring magic, weaving them together in a delicate balance. The gear from the clock tower began to spin in midair, marking the passage of time. The graveyard soil and spring bloom intertwined, representing the cycle of life and death, and the mystical dewdrops floated above it all, capturing the essence of the in-between moments. Noah stood beside her, lending his strength and steady presence to the ritual. Around them, the team formed a protective circle, their own magic reinforcing Sabrina's efforts. As Sabrina chanted the final words of the spell, the first rays of sunlight crested the horizon. In that moment, both rituals, Sabrina's stabilizing magic and the opposing faction's chaotic spell, reached their peak. The magical energies collided with catastrophic force, creating a blinding confluence of power that threatened to tear reality apart.